In the year 1942, college students from the University of Munich formed a daring resistance movement. These individuals would become role models for all of Germany. Their names were Sophie Scholl, Hans Scholl, Alexander Schmorell, Willy Graf, and Christoph Probst. The members of the White Rose took a stand in a situation that would have made rebellion very difficult. Their strong moral compass and independent minds inspired this movement. They were tried and executed, but their legacy made the movement a success. Sophie and Hans Scholl were raised in Ulm, located in Bavaria. They had 3 siblings, Inga, Elisabeth, and Werner. Their father, Robert Scholl, an attorney and financial advisor, was against the Nazis. He encouraged his children to think independently. He told them, speaking about the Nazis, "Don't believe them. They are wolves and deceivers, and they are misusing the German people shamefully." Robert Scholl did not want his children to join the Hitler Youth, but he did not prevent them from joining when they chose it. He said to them, "What I want most of all is that you live in uprightness and freedom of spirit, no matter how difficult that may be." Sophie Scholl was smart and a good writer. Her father called her the wisest of my women. She was serious and thoughtful, yet fun-loving. She loved to read and secretly read forbidden books. Sophie was a true friend and remained friends with Jewish girls even when she was pressured not to. Sophie joined the League of German Girls, but grew unhappy with the conformity, censorship, and unfairness shown to her Jewish friends. A friend of Hans Scholl described him this way: "Hans was a very complicated person, very special, different from other guys. He saw different possibilities. On top of everything, Hans had no fear. He had no sense of danger." Hans Scholl was very popular in the Hitler Youth. He became leader of a group of 150 boys. Hans wanted his group to have a sense of individuality, so he had the boys design a flag for their squad. In a rally, he let a 12-year-old boy carry the flag, as well as the Nazi flag. Another leader came up and demanded that they hand in their flag. The boy resisted. The leader yelled at the boy and tried to yank the flag from his hands. In his defense, Hans came up and slapped the leader. This had him immediately stripped of his rank. Disillusioned, Hans quit the Hitler Youth. In spring 1939, Hans enrolled at the University of Munich, a prestigious leading university in Germany, to study medicine. At the university, he made friends with other students, Willy Graf, Alexander Schmorell, and Christoph Probst. Hans, Willy, Alexander, and Christoph started meeting to discuss poetry. One day, the conversation turned to the tyranny of Hitler and the Nazis. The meetings turned to discussions of politics. This was risky because any conversation against the Nazis or the war could get them arrested. But they were all like-minded. Each of the friends was religious and had a strong respect for human life. They each had strong morals and were independent thinkers. Hans had been part of a separate youth group after quitting the Hitler Youth. Alexander was half Russian and his stepmother was Jewish. He and Christoph had gone to liberal boarding schools that taught non-German ideas. Willy had been a member of a Catholic youth group and had refused to join Hitler Youth, for which he had been arrested when younger. These friends trusted each other entirely. After finishing her required labor service in May 1942, Sophie Scholl went to the University of Munich to join her older brother. Hans introduced her to his friends. Sophie was welcomed into the group and frequently joined them in their discussions. On campus one day, Sophie saw some people reading papers titled "Leaflets of the White Rose." Curious, she picked one up and started reading. She recognized the wording from conversations she'd had with Hans and his friends. Sophie went home and looked through Hans's books. In a book of classical literature, she found some phrases highlighted that had been used in the leaflet. She confronted Hans. He confessed to writing the leaflet. Sophie insisted on joining him. Together, the members of the White Rose wrote 6 leaflets that discussed the atrocities of Hitler's regime, shamed the German people for not standing against it, and called for passive resistance against the Nazis. The first 4 leaflets were printed and distributed in June and July 1942. They made thousands of copies of the leaflets in a dark art collector's basement using a mimeograph machine borrowed from a friend. Then, Hans, Alexander, Willy, and Christoph went to serve as army medics on the Russian front. They were troubled by the horrible things they saw there. After that summer, the medics returned to Munich. There, the members of the White Rose worked to expand their movement to other cities. They traveled by train to Hamburg, Saarbrücken, Berlin, and Ulm, where they mailed leaflets from and to many different locations. The fifth leaflet, titled A Call to All Germans, was edited by Kurt Huber, their favorite philosophy professor at the university. This leaflet was printed in larger numbers than the First World War. Huber joined the group and began participating in their meetings. After 330,000 Germans died in Stalingrad, Huber asked to write the sixth leaflet, in which he discussed the horrible waste of life. Late at night, Hans, Alexander, and Willy painted anti-Nazi slogans on the sides of buildings at the University of Munich. They used tar-based paint which couldn't be scrubbed off. Taking a stand and speaking out like the members of the White Rose did would have been very dangerous.
It would have been very difficult, actually. Everybody was kind of watching everyone else. Children were encouraged to turn in their parents. If they were, listening to forbidden radio or talking about or reading forbidden books or whatever. It was really very discouraged.
On Thursday, February 18, 1943, Sophie and Hans Scholl went to the University of Munich to distribute stacks of the sixth leaflet. When they finished, Sophie noticed that there were papers left in her suitcase. Sophie flung them into the air from the third floor into a large atrium. A custodian, Jacob Schmid, noticed the papers drifting down. He looked up, saw Hans and Sophie, and captured them. They were taken into Gestapo custody. They were interrogated for 4 days, after which the judge Roland Freisler found them, as well as Christoph Probst, guilty of high treason. Sophie Scholl, Hans Scholl, and Christoph Probst were executed at 5 o'clock on the afternoon of February 22, 1943. Alexander Schmorell and Kurt Huber were executed on July 13th, and Willy Graf was executed on October 12th after 7 months of solitary confinement. Hans Scholl's last words were, "Long live freedom." According to Dr. Paul Carey of Brigham Young University, this meant freedom for Germany, for a future changed Germany. Sophie Scholl's last words were, "How can we expect righteousness to prevail when there is hardly anyone willing to give himself up individually to a righteous cause? Such a fine sunny day, and I have to go, but what does my death matter if through us thousands of people are awakened and stirred to action?" Willy Graf's last words were, "They shall continue what we have begun." Taking a stand in the circumstances that the members of the White Rose were in was not a thing very many people would be able to do. According to Dr. Paul Carey, sociologists have studied the traits of people who tend to resist oppression. They found that resistors tend to be taught by parents early on to think for themselves, belong to an outsider group, have some kind of moral compass, make quick decisions, and have some kind of religious background. Sophie and Hans Scholl's father, Robert, wanted his children to think independently and make decisions for themselves. Every member of the group has some sort of experience being persecuted because of not conforming. Every member of the group has some sort of religious background or supported spiritual ideas. So why did they do it? Why did they resist?
They felt that what they were doing was so important that they were willing to take the risk.
Shortly after the Scholl siblings were executed, slogans appeared on the walls of the University of Munich. They said, "Scholl lives. You can break the body, but never the spirit." No mass rebellion was ever started, but the leaflets continued to circulate and spread throughout and beyond Germany to other countries. In late 1943, Allied planes dropped thousands of copies of the sixth leaflet, written by Kurt Huber, over Germany. It was titled Manifesto of the Students of Munich. The effect of the White Rose spread across the world. Thomas Mann, a German reporter living in America, said the following in a radio broadcast. "Good, splendid young people, you shall not have died in vain. You shall not be forgotten. The German Revolution, the real revolution, will memorialize these people who knew and publicly declared. A new faith in freedom and honor is dawning." Many memorials have been built in Munich to honor the White Rose. The White Rose movement means to Germany that, in that time, there were people who were willing to stand up against the Nazis when most people wouldn't. People who would dare to do that even knowing the consequences. They serve as an example for all of Germany, the nation of poets and thinkers, and for the rest of the world that it's okay to be different, to be the person who steps up and says that something is wrong and we need to fix it. The sacrifice of the White Rose members' lives was not wasted because those who came after needed to know that there were Germans who stood up and acted bravely in the face of a powerful totalitarian regime. The mass movement the White Rose called for was not started immediately, but today countless people in Germany and around the world are inspired by the bravery, conviction, and morality of the small, courageous band of students.